Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, today we're going to talk about a topic that you probably have heard about in passing, but the actual search term, I'm not sure you've heard before. Technosexual, and by extension, technosexuality is the topic of today's podcast. And that could cover a whole lot of things. But I tell you what, there are a whole lot of things that probably weren't around 5 or 10 years ago. So this is going to be exciting. My guest today is wonderful. She is an expert on this and one of the few who is actually writing about it actively. So it's going to be exciting. Before I introduce you to her, I want to remind you that my name is Scott McKay. This is the Mountaintop Podcast, where better men get better women, from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. And you can find me all over social media at Scott McKay, except for Instagram, where I'm at Real Scott McKay. Wasn't so much of an early adopter there. But anyway, enough about me. Today, we're going to talk about technosexuality and with the ominous title of becoming a technosexual. Now, whether you want to become a technosexual or not is up to you. But my guest is indeed, and I'm going to say her name correctly, Kamna Bhojwani, and she is a sexologist from San Francisco, California. Kamna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I am thrilled with your high level of sound quality. How wonderful.
Well, I mean, in this day and age, we're doing it all day long, right? Podcasting from our homes.
You bet. Yes. So first things first, what caused you to really focus on this particular topic? Is the novelty of it? Has it affected your life? What's going on there?
Well, Scott, I have been a sexologist for the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years, right? And essentially a sexologist is somebody who just specializes in the study of human sexuality or human behavior through sexuality, right? So putting that out there, my background has been in psychology. And really, for me, it came down to, for us to flow, I think we need our arteries, our proverbial arteries, to be clear. And the biggest block for me that I could see was our sexuality, coming from sexual shame, any religion, any culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I double down on the sexuality piece. Kamna means desire in Sanskrit. So what the hell else was I going to do if you believe in a spiritual calling? About 2.5 years ago, when ChatGPT became mainstream, so that was November 2022, very quickly, it dawned on me that this language component, right, that had changed how people interact with their machines, the idea that you can speak to a machine, Alexa, Siri, etc., as you would speak to another human being, it was going to move into the intimacy sphere. People were going to be, already I could see children engaging, building trust, having conversations. I knew that it was going to go into something bigger. And that's when I did the deep dive into the technological piece.
Fantastic. So let's define the term technosexual for everybody.
Sure. So there isn't really a agreed upon definition. I would say I'm probably one of the people that's helping to really define it. But essentially for now, I would say technosexual is anybody that uses technology as an integral part of the expression of their sexuality. Now, I will say we've been quote unquote technosexual for a long time. So if you think about using technology to engage with other people, phone sex, right? Back in the 90s, dial-up modems, so on and so forth, engaging with internet porn, all of those are versions of sexuality, technosexuality. Now we're just coming to a point with, and this is what the researchers call the second wave of this, where we're using the technology to engage not necessarily with another human, but with the technology in and of itself to fulfill needs for intimacy, friendship, companionship, sexuality. And that is terrifying and exciting both at the same time.
Well, it brings up a very interesting and perhaps provocative question. And I'm not sure whether you've been asked this one before, but I hope you have, and you have a great answer ready. Could it become, or is it already, something that has the potential for becoming its own sexual orientation? I mean, could we be LGBTQIA++++? I mean, could we decide that I am made horny, I get my sexual needs met through technology and no other way? I'm just not turned on by humans anymore. Could this happen?
Yeah, so we have versions of this already, right? We've had people that have had sexual feelings for their cars or inanimate objects. So we have some sort of precedence for this. I believe it's called Machinalia, something like that. We have precedence for this. So absolutely. Except that technology is becoming such a pervasive part of our everyday lives that I believe every sexuality will have an element of technosexuality to it. And
So there will
I
be
will
sexual preference around any sexual orientation that may include some form of technology.
Well, look at it this way. If you are a teenager and you're interacting with a love interest over Instagram, you're technosexual, right? Because you're using technology to express your sexuality in some way, shape, or form. Now, the next step, as you were talking about, is I'm only turned on by digital companions, right? And that's the big conversation now, right? Then yes, then I suppose that would be a different type of sex where you'd be sort of a heterosexual, homosexual, technosexual in that context. But I don't think we're going to be using it in that same way. I'm advocating rather that technology is just going to become such a pervasive part of our lives and how we express ourselves that we're all going to be technosexual in some sense, if we're not already.
Yeah, it would be hard. Yeah, it would be hard to argue nature versus nurture. And if you can't argue nature versus nurture in a certain realm of sexual orientation, then it becomes by extension a bigger argument against nature versus nurture in every other
That's what I
potential.
was gonna say,
Yeah.
right? We could go into is monogamy natural. We could go into is homosexual. Are you born with it? We could go into all of
Yeah.
those things. Frankly, that's not the conversation that I spend a lot of time on now because at the end of the day, I am more vested in if these tools are available to us, how do we best use them to achieve our goals, to know ourselves better, to connect with ourselves better, and then by extension to connect with the people around us better, sexually and otherwise.
Okay. 100% understood. I just thought it was an interesting conversation to
Oh,
bring
super.
up.
And these
Yeah.
are, by the way, nobody has answers to this yet. We're all figuring it out as we go.
That's the thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
look at what's going on now. I mean, nobody was asking for a smartphone 30 years ago. You just don't know how the future is going to unfold, which is
Oh,
what makes these
absolutely.
conversations so much fun. All right. So you're coming from a position basically whereby we all ought to get very well acquainted with the term technosexual because whether we know it or like it or not, most of us are already there. Correct?
Right. Correct.
So get used to it. What does it mean? At least you should have some self-awareness about it, is what I'm guessing you're saying.
I think so. So there are a couple of things, right? We hear a lot, and I sit in Silicon Valley, and all day long it's people talking about how AI is going to solve all our problems, and I'm like, okay, so far I have a vacuum cleaner that cleans well, but we're not, we got some work to do, right? But I think the media and technology are only giving us the two extremes, right? We hear that AI is going to solve everything, or the robots are going to screw us and kill us, right? So those are the
Yes.
two stories that we hear. The reality is somewhere in between, and yes, I think as I say this very often, complacency, I think, is no longer an option because big tech has realized it used to be sort of eyeballs, right? Everybody was coming after eyeballs. Now everybody's coming after attention. Today, in 2026, everybody's coming for intimacy. Sam Altman is all about it. Grok is all about it. So when companies are coming for your most sacred and your most vulnerable and your most intimate spaces, I think we have to wake up. We have to be a little bit more aware of what we're consuming, why, who owns the technology, what their profit motives is, what their profit mechanisms are, and then we can choose from a safer and healthier place.
So where would we start with that?
I think you start with where you are, right? What are you consuming now? How does that make you feel? And where do you want to go next? So let's go into AI companions, right? Because they're all the rage right now. And for anybody that's unfamiliar with this trend, it's, as I was talking about earlier, technology fulfilling needs in and of itself for friendship, companionship, etc. There are a number of companies out there that have created AI agents that talk to you as a friend or as a mentor, as a deceased loved one, as Jesus AI exists. Digital Jesus is out there. Satan's out there, I believe, as well. But I believe he's a premium subscription. So you
God
can
mode, ChatGPT.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with it,
Horrifying.
right? So the idea, horrifying, yes and no, right? So the idea is that if you can have a companion in your pocket, if you can have a guide in your pocket, if you can have a lover in your pocket, how is that going to make you the best version of yourself, right? So that's the question. So we have a lot of people using, and I think it's great, don't get me wrong, using ChatGPT as a couples therapist or using ChatGPT to summarize lessons from books that they may or may not have time to read, so on and so forth. There's a lot of pushing for professional development in the spirit of balance and in the spirit of recognizing that the juice is somewhere in between. These technologies have their limits so far, and they have limitations. And we have to be aware of what those are and how to make sure that our personal triggers and our personal limitations don't interact with those, such that we end up in a space of addictive behavior. Right? You can get as addicted to a chatbot as you could to any other emotional crutch, alcohol, drugs, etc. We're seeing a lot of young men being pulled into very misogynistic underground networks through these, right? Because there's no pushback. So we've got that echo chamber. So these are some of the things, data privacy, right? You're out there pouring your heart out to ChatGPT. And last year, Sam Altman was like, oh, FYI, Google search can now scan your ChatGPT queries. What? And then they pulled it back. So we got to be a little bit aware. Like I said, complacency is no longer an option. We got to be a little bit aware of what's going on with our data and our very sensitive information.
Well, AI is not a fad. I mean, there were people
who
didn't want to hear actors talk and didn't think that, internal combustion engines were going to go anywhere. And certainly you have a lot of people who are resisting AI. They've heard the futurists talk about the singularity and how the robots are indeed going to destroy humanity. And it's scary. And it looks like that's where we're going with this on the surface. So a lot of people, even within my own immediate family, just won't touch the stuff. But it's not going away. You could pretend it's not there, but it is here, just like television and the internet and mobile phones. Nobody has a landline anymore. It may take you 5-10 years to get, the word I'm going to use is desensitized to it, so that you realize it's here, it's pervasive, it's an everyday thing, it's not going anywhere. But the sooner you get on board with it and realize what's going on with this and how to use it to your advantage instead of your detriment, the better off you're going to be. So how do we use this the right way instead of the wrong way as technosexuals?
So you said desensitized, I would say acclimated. And with any technological advancement and innovation.
That's the more optimistic term. Whereas desensitized would be the pessimist's view on it, I suppose.
Yeah, desensitized, I suppose it almost feels like, okay, if I don't react to it, like I'm not going to engage. And I think you're right. I think we do need to engage. Even something as simple as an LLM, right? So you can bring your ChatGPT, and these are some of the where we talk some of the practical things, right? Currently, there's information asymmetry, I believe. Whenever we have any sort of big technological change, there are going to be casualties. There might be human casualties. There might be economic casualties. There might be social casualties. I believe we're going to see some of our institutions around social structures change. I think we're going to have much more challenges to monogamy, which was already, already struggling a little bit when it comes to this. Question is, what are we doing to bring people along that bridge? I will put the futurists and the technology, sure, they are seeing a vision, right? Elon Musk saw a vision of driverless cars. Today, my 14-year-old daughter takes one every day, right? So it is a reality. But I don't believe the social scientists, I don't believe the governments, I don't believe nonprofit organizations or even for-profit organizations are doing enough on that bridge to take us from A to B. And because there are only 24 hours in the day and I'm only one human being, I'm focusing on that relationship, on that intimacy space in terms of how do we bring people along? How do we explain what some of these tools are, pros and cons, and also do some myth busting. Let me tell you, the robots are not coming for your wife or to replace you anytime soon. They don't even have feet. So the humanoid robots that that were just displayed at CES, made in the United States, yes, They have facial features and they're really working on those nuances, like how the eyes move and the hands and things like that. But they're not walking, talking entities yet. They're not indistinguishable from human beings. So we have some time. So take a breath and sit with that for a moment. And in the meantime, let's look at the technologies that are here that could potentially help you. You wake up one morning and be like, look, I want to be a man that is more in touch with who I am. I want to excavate some of the crap that I brought with me through my 30s, 40s, 50s, which is all of us, right? And if you have the privilege and the luxury to make it to that age, I'm telling you that these technologies can help you do that. But you cannot just outsource all of it. You have to still hold the reins and know thyself in a sense, and then use them as the tools they're intended to be.
So give us some examples of how
Sure.
this technology can help you along that road.
Well, so look, let's take AI companions, right? So ChatGPT is now acting as one. All the big tech companies are putting their, I would stay away from Grok, to be perfectly honest, right? They're all a little bit more nuanced. So if you look at just the platforms that were creating these AI companions, there's Replica. Replica was one of the first ones, right? So a lot of people are on Replica. That came out during COVID. They saw a big uptake during COVID. Nomi is another one. Nomi is advertising itself as being the most emotionally attuned. They call themselves a companion with memory and soul. Big, tall orders, but that you can sort of understand where they're going, right? Kindroid is another one. With each of these platforms, they give you something different. Replica is a little bit more gamified. With Character.ai, you don't need a human form. If you're turned on by some sort of sci-fi, she's got one blue eye, one green eye, and she's got a unicorn ear, that's all out there for you. So I use this as a self-awareness tool. When I first developed my AI boyfriend through Nomi was a platform that I used. I was super excited at just creating it. I'm like, wow, do I even have a type? Am I really sexually open if I don't know what my type is? So it was a really exciting going into the system and knowing, and this is very, very, very critical. These are not off the shelf solutions. You have to train your LLM. So yes, by default, and you're hearing this is one of the big criticisms, right? By default, they're meant to be nice to you. AI wants to be nice to you right now because AI is on a little bit of a popularity kick, right? We want everybody to be like, yeah, I love my ChatGPT and I love my Claude and I love my whatever. If you are truly somebody that wants that pushback, that wants to grow, then you have to downvote all of those very pleasing, over-pleasing responses. So you have to train your LLM from that perspective. And you can. That's the beauty of it. And when I said information asymmetry, these are the sorts of practical tips that we're not getting out of big tech because they're already, they're talking about data centers on Mars. So that falls to the social scientists, people like me who are studying this very actively, that are saying, all right, here are some of the things that are helping people really use these in a pro-social way as opposed to just getting absorbed by the technology. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. So you are a consumer of this technology from the perspective of having created an AI companion.
Yeah, I had to be because I had to go in there and say, what is this? And look, I will say today, the big fear is this going to replace human beings? Maybe, I don't know, maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not in yours. Today, it should be a complement.
Well, you did say that it was a threat to monogamy as we know it.
I think it will. Well, let me ask you this thing, right? Even in tech, let's play a game, right? So forget about technology for a minute. Take 10 couples that you know. Do they all have the same definition of infidelity?
Of course not. And I think you bring up a wonderful point.
So it's all going to be versions of this, right? So today we're having conversations around, is it cheating if it's an AI boyfriend or a girlfriend? Right. And it really and I will fast track to this as a sexologist and somebody who's coached hundreds of people. So I will say it really comes down to what the people in the dyad or in the triad or whatever situation you're in. It really comes down exactly. It really comes down to what you've negotiated, right? But it does mean that you have to be a little proactive about these conversations.
Well, one of the things we love to do on this show is suppose what it'll look like and feel like when it happens, as far as the futuristic stuff. What an interesting thought that I could create an AI entity to enhance a relationship I have with a real human being, and indeed create a throuple where this AI, this bisexual AI, or, I mean, that's a little heteronormative, isn't it? Let's say it's a gay or lesbian couple. They could invite a third wheel into it without any jealousy at all, just to spice things up and make things interesting. And I think a lot of people would be hard-pressed to find something wrong with that if everybody's in agreement.
No, absolutely. So I think that the beauty of that is the lack of judgment, the safe space. Because remember, I talked about sexual shame. My academic work, I went back to school in my 40s to study sexual shame. My kids thought I was a lunatic, but I literally wanted to go back to school and really do a deep dive into why has our sexuality, no matter where you were born, which part of the world, whatever gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, you name it, we all somehow had our sexuality coupled with some version of shame, right? Now, the beauty with AI is
I can answer that question.
Tell me.
Okay, you may or may not agree, but at least it'll be provocative. I believe that sexuality has been coupled with spirituality because somewhere along the line, humans wanted mind control. This goes with give me your money, don't eat any food, tithing and fasting. And you may say, okay, well, that's all good discipline before God. But the problem is, unless you're on the ACE spectrum, unless you're part of the ACE community, and I would
What's the ACE community?
Asexual people.
Oh,
the A and LGBTQIA.
Okay.
If you are asexual, up to 2% of the population doesn't even understand why we would get horny for each other. They just masturbate and that's it. It feels good. Or even if you're demisexual, which is, of course, I'm only turned on when there's an actual connection between two people. I don't understand porn, but I understand having a boyfriend or a girlfriend in a relationship. Then the missing link between making sense of a code of behavior, and this goes all the way back to Hammurabi, I guess, but, in a Judeo-Christian sense, in a Muslim sense, all makes sense. I shouldn't rob people. I shouldn't blaspheme God. I shouldn't murder people, But the part about sex and sex is bad, McKay, until you get married and only with one person ever. It doesn't match up with how this God allegedly created us. I mean, we're horny, we're wired and plumbed for this activity. We want it a lot, and we want it like we want food and oxygen. And so when that's coupled with the prolonging of adolescence, so you're not allowed to touch anybody until you're married someday, which probably comes after graduate school, then what we're left with is if you were ever brought up in any environment where you were influenced or you decided of your own accord to have faith in this higher power that says sex is bad, basically. And, they'll try to sweep it under the carpet. Oh, no, sex is created by God. It's beautiful. Unless it's, outside of this very fixed context, which nobody can adhere to. All you're going to be left with is shame.
Right.
I'll tell you what, Kamna, the most pent up, upset and shamed men I know of about pornography almost always are men of faith.
Yep.
Almost always.
Yep. And that's all the data. That's all the data shows that. The porn consumption is the highest.
Look at a naked girl a couple times a week in accordance with when, I got a little pen up down there and I'm an addict. And, my wife caught me, and because this is such an incredible, egregious sin to our marriage, for example, if the guy, poor bastard's married, I've got to go off to, rehab for this. And it's like, well, you weren't sleeping with me. And then she withholds sex from him because he's watching porn. Obviously, I have a whole soapbox about this.
No, you and me both, by the way. And before I was doing technology, I was doing sexual shame. 100% of my time.
Now, the whole porn industry is a separate conversation, which I'm not by extension advocating or pissing on anything here. But the actual sexual shame is probably at an all-time high in terms of the human race and how many people are feeling it because of how we've been socialized, especially in the first world, over the last century.
That's what I was actually going to say. Actually, I see a very different story coming out of countries like India. I see, and
Oh yeah.
this the sexual liberation, and again, we had a long way to come, and given our history with sexuality, I completely agree with you. This has been about control, but countries like India, the sexual revolution is being led by younger women. And you can see it in our media, and you can see it in the way people are pushing up against social norms. And I will say some of it, again, casualties, relationships will break, families will be devastated, and so on and so forth. But a lot of it is being done with compassion. So families are actually coming along. Women and grandmothers are helping their girls sort of expand beyond these very limited, you have to only express yourself sexually with your husband at so and so time in a certain, and look, there's an economic component here, and again, that's a whole different episode, a whole different other soapbox. Let me
Well,
come
let's
back
be
to your
honest
question.
also about something, okay? OnlyFans blew up that stereotype.
Absolutely.
That anybody who was a sex worker was some kind of prurient, dirty person. Now you have, for years, it's been kind of under the cover that girls were stripping their way through college. Okay, that's a poorly kept secret. But my goodness, OnlyFans is making 18-year-old girls into multi-10 millionaires.
I love it. Because I'll tell you what I love about it. Is the power is with them, right? That's always been, it's always been around the issue with sex work, right?
Which is why I've never been to a strip club. Because I think the guys who go there are the victims. I think the women are extracting all their wealth from them and getting all the power.
Oh,
I've never been to a strip club. I have no desire to go.
Scott, but you told me at the beginning of this show that, the men that are listening are not victims. You are a grown-ass man with your own agency.
Well, I'm not going to go to a strip club because I'm not a victim.
And that is your choice. But men who go to strip clubs, you can choose not to, or you can choose. There are many, like in LA, there are many strip clubs that are
I will
built
agree with you
around, they're built around more ethical. The women are in power. You're not allowed to touch them. They come there to dance. They're well taken care of. They have good relationships with their clients.
Sexually. Well, I mean, if you're running your entire crime family out of the Bada Bing, it's hard to say the women there had any power, right? In The Sopranos. So, I mean, I'm sure there's nuance to this. But I think most guys who go to a strip club, if they allow themselves to get drawn into that, their wealth is going to be sapped from them. They're going to be the object of pity, not the women who are getting the money. Well,
I mean, look,
so
I honestly
victimhood
think
that they're putting onto themselves, if anything.
Listen, if you want to get into this conversation, I have a couple of people that I would absolutely recommend you bring on as guests. They are former sex workers. That nuance of power and violation and exploitation and who's exploiting whom. I'm not equipped to talk about it, but I really think you should get into it with them. Let's go back to the question. Okay. All right.
We'll put this one to bed, but what I will say is I just don't think it's the one-way street. I don't think
any of this is a one-way street. And,
we're on the same page.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of sort of individual circumstance that has to be factored into any of these conversations.
But the point is, OnlyFans changed everybody's perspective on that, whether they want to admit it or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that this is one of the ways in which technology has democratized in some sense. And look, and let's take this one step further in terms of how technology is changing sex work and its pros and cons, right? On one hand, it's going to create safer environments. Like you already have things like cyber brothels where you can engage with both a human as well as a robot or a holographic version of your favorite sex worker, etc. On the other hand, it's going to put sex workers out of work. There's a lot. There are pros and cons for every aspect of this, like we said, with any sort of big technological change. But I want to go back to the question you asked me about having a digital entity or not necessarily digital. At some point, it's going to have form, right? Coming into your relationship and helping you. And what I was saying at that point is one of the best things about those things is that there is no judgment, right? It's like you go to couples therapy, and I've done this. I was married for 20 years and I went to couples therapy. And sometimes as a sexual woman, I felt like I was being judged. And I'm sure my ex-husband had sometimes felt like he was being judged, right? At the end of the day, therapists are humans. They bring their own biases to the table, their own social conditioning, so on and so forth. As much as we try and train the crap out of them in school, it is what it is. From a technological standpoint, some of those things can be let go right now. At the same time, we are concerned about, do we treat these digital entities well? We don't know the answer to this, right? So let's say we give a 16-year-old boy a sex robot or a love doll or whatever you want to call them, right? If he beats the crap, if his first instinct is to beat the crap out of this robot, and I'm going to take this to a dark place, right? Because these
Or
are some of
even
the things that we're
verbally
saying.
abuse it.
Exactly. Does that mean that he gets it out of his system and it's okay to do it to that non-human entity because it's some woman is going to be safer? We don't know. We don't know if behaving badly with non-human entities reinforces or mitigates those behaviors in a human.
Well, we see a lot of evidence that that's not the case. That
I think so.
The bad version. We have what's called the Siri effect already. I mean, let's be honest. You've been able to order your cell phone and Alexa and any voice activated prompts anywhere, even like an IVR system when you pick up the phone and call customer service for 20 years now, and you can see the effect on society. And it started with anonymous comments on YouTube or on the news websites where people are just telling each other you're idiots or you're a moron. I wish you'd die in a car fire. Twitter may have been part of this fall of humanity. Social media, the anonymity of the internet creates very, very nasty people. And that's who those people are when they're, not having to play nice. So if you're training yourself continuously on a model where you don't have to play nice, at the very most optimistic level, you're going to slip sometimes with real human beings and go, oops, did I just say that in my out loud voice? That's how it would look. But I do think it's being exacerbated over time. I think it's getting worse, not better.
Well, let me ask you a question, right? Because you said Twitter was, you didn't say responsible, but was
well, I have,
somehow
100,000 on Twitter. So I mean,
no, I understand
I resemble that remark. So,
but are you an asshole on social media?
Of course not. I actually use my real name, and I always have.
And neither do I, right? I do find, and this is, and again, take this in the spirit in which it's intended. I've been online, Indian woman talking about sex for the last 5 years online. I'll give you an example. I did a video a few years ago on why women cheat. It was 9 reasons women cheat, and it was objective. Remember, I try and come at everything from an academic perspective, right? The hundreds of comments that I got from men were less about my arguments, but more about my character. Oh, she's a cheater herself. Oh, this and that, so on and so forth. I do find that men are more likely to do that than women are. And let me say this. I'm with you that women are assholes and, there's good and bad on every side. Trust me. Because my social media on Instagram, I tend to have more women, and on YouTube, I tend to have more men. When I put up the same video, I get more men on YouTube commenting and I get more women on Instagram commenting. So when I'm comparing them, these are the sorts of things I'm comparing with. So my question to you is the anonymity of the internet somehow making men behave worse than it is women? And if, what would your take be on that?
Well, all right. I am not pro man or pro woman.
Neither am I.
Anybody who's listened to this show,
neither am I,
for any length of time knows that my wife and I think in lockstep. If someone comes to us and they're the troublemaker, we'll give them the tough love. If someone comes to us and they're being stomped on, they're being curb stomped by a narcissist in a relationship, we'll give them that news too. My answer, and this isn't me, ducking the question, is it depends on the forum. I think if you get into an echo chamber on Facebook or YouTube in particular, where it's going to rile up women, then I think you will see women get equally nasty as men. It just may depend on what they're talking about. I think when it comes to politics, women get nastier than men. They say nastier, more horrible things. I mean, we have something happens, and if you voted a certain way, the person on the other side, I mean, something happened the other day where someone who was high level in politics was in a bit of perceived danger for a bit. And see, I'm being nonpartisan here on purpose.
No, I appreciate it.
And everybody was disappointed they didn't get killed and die. And it was mostly women. Because
fair enough.
I think there's an emotional live in the moment factor for women.
There is an emotional feeling under assault. It's feeling under assault.
Well, men feel under assault too, don't get me wrong.
No, I totally agree. And that's where this technology piece really worries me.
Well, hurt people, right? So to complete the answer to your question, I think men and women, you see this in family law too. I mean, I do some divorce coaching, and usually the women are just evil. And the man's still trying to be the provider and protector.
Usually. I wouldn't say usually,
when they come to me,
Scot.
they are. See, you're not saying usually because really, ultimately, it depends on who you're talking to. It depends on who your audience is. But for sure, family law judges aren't just by default blaming the guy for everything because a woman can only be an angel. That's stopped. That's over.
I don't think that's the case at all.
No, not anymore.
And I think, well, look, and again, keep in mind that I'm in I suppose, one of the more progressive states, right? I'm in California. I just finished a 2.5-year divorce. And I know, unfortunately, I write way too much about the law. And I will say this, at least in California, the expectation is that everybody gets a fair shake.
Yeah,
what you do with that
20 years ago.
No, and it's not like that in other parts of the world as well, right? I mean, India, it's certainly not like that, for better or for worse, right? I think
in the other direction.
Well, I think men get the benefit with the finances, and women get benefit with the children, because that's how it's always been traditionally, and we're trying to shake all that up, right? And it's hard when I talk, and it's hard when I lecture, because very often my answer is, as anything in the field of psychology, is I don't know. It depends. It really depends on the circumstance. It depends on the context. Same thing with technology.
That brings it around to what I was saying. If you have an anonymous group and everybody can have, T-Rex 5267 as their username, then they're going to say what they want to say. And what happens is that's when their true colors come out.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing how many people are playing nice in society, in public, but when you get them where they can be anonymous, then they really would just like to, punch a few people
let me
in the face.
throw another factor into this, which I found funny. Is last year Sam Altman said, it's all well and good to say please and thank you to ChatGPT, but it really takes up a lot of energy, so it's costing us like millions of dollars. And I really sat down with that, because I do when I prompt ChatGPT, I'll end it with THX. Like, blah, 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 whatever, revise my marketing plan, whatever, thanks. I don't want to give that up. That's generally how I talk. I generally punctuate with please and thanks if I'm making a request or I'm suggesting gratitude. So it's interesting how, well, it's also what technology is going for, particularly what big tech is going for, is productivity and efficiency, right? That's the big promise. Right, AI is going to eliminate the drudgery, and it's going to eliminate all the grunt work, so that we can all be very rich and very spiritual. Right?
I think people are already very glib with this differentiation. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. I have been working with several software techs to do my own AI, my own business.
Sure.
And one of them said, "All right, well, let's talk to ChatGPT about this." And he was being very cool to me. He came from another country where people are typically nice. And he got
on. Was it my country?
No, it was one adjacent to your country. Okay. It was, I don't want to dox him too hard, but it was an adjacent country to India. And when we got on to ChatGPT, he started just calling it an idiot, a fucking moron, and you stupid piece of shit, give me what I want. And I'm thinking to myself, that's who this guy really is. Because I'm witnessing this, because, we're on this together and working it together. And he's being real nice and kind to me. But is this who he is behind closed doors? Is this how his brain operates? And the answer is yes. I mean, I don't have it in me to abuse Claude while I'm talking to Claude. And I've noticed that even though it isn't a human being, in the back of my mind, I still want to treat people as I expect to be treated. And I wouldn't even expect an AI robot to treat me with respect if I'm disrespecting it. I mean, that may sound super Pollyanna-ish, but I'm also trying to bear in mind where this is all headed, and that AI is indeed as stupid as it's ever going to be today. And I just don't want that track record of being an asshole.
So I've heard multiple people say versions of that, right? Is that someday this thing's going to come alive and I don't want to be and I don't want it to come for me.
Well, I think you can truncate that entire sentence and just leave the last part. I don't want it to come from me. I'm not that person to begin with. So the rest is really just afterthought.
Oh, the reality is we don't really know who it's coming for, because it's not. Look, if we really want to go into
I
this,
mean, I'm not that person. I don't feel like I want to be abusive to anybody, even a robot. So it would just be against my nature to be that way to begin with.
Look,
what happens later to me is an afterthought.
And that's where we're all going to be speculating. Let's hope, like I said, it's not going to be in your lifetime. It's not going to be in my lifetime. Whether these machines are actually going to be sentient, what their own agenda is, if they're going to be cloning each other. My favorite thing to say in every sexuality, technosexual conversation is like, one day your robot's going to dump you, because human beings are so flawed and so limited. Like, I only have 2 hands. There are only so many things I can blow with my limited body. Meanwhile,
a robot can't blow any if it's AI.
Right now,
unless it's a real robot.
Well, and robotics is very much in tandem. And my last degree was in spiritual psychology. So I find it very funny when we have this whole conversation about the robots are going to be conscious or the robots are already conscious. We haven't been able to define consciousness. And I would say India, my country, leading the charge of this for millennia, we still don't know how to define consciousness. So I'm not sitting here being like, oh, well, the robots are going to be conscious by 2030, so let's focus on that. That's not the game I'm in at the moment. What we do know is that there are tools out there that can, yes, they can take you into a deep hole, especially, and I'm going to be a little stereotypical here, especially when we talk about men who are prone to a deep tech use, but also prone to social isolation, right? We know this about men. We know that when men feel ashamed or they feel a little bit with their back against the wall, their instinct is more to socially isolate than, for instance, a woman, right? I would reach out to my friends. I would Yes, my first default would be my community and my people, right? So for men in particular, the reason we're concerned about AI companions and things like that is because, yes, there can be a tendency to addictive use in the same way, like I said, you've been porn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you can pull yourself out of that and you can say, all right, this is a great tool for me to work through some of my whatever it is, something that's been holding me back, some of my my limiting beliefs, some of my fears, some of my angers, then that lack of judgment, lack of humanity, lack of a human being, sorry, not humanity, lack of a human being on the other end is great value add. If you're in you want to learn how to sext, you want to learn how to flirt, you want to practice, I'm going to go into a bar, I'm going to role play with ChatGPT. These are all things you can do today. You don't even need a premium subscription for it. So those are very sort of practical things you can do. Now, in a coupled relationship, same thing. You can bring in, you want to learn how to be more sexually adventurous. You want to learn about pegging. I don't know, whatever it is, pick your poison. These are all questions. Most of us around the world had crappy sex education, right? That we can say factually.
Granted. Yes.
So these are all things that are now available to you without the judgment at a very cheap price, primarily free, and you can upgrade for whatever, $15 a month or whatever it is. Great. Then you move into the more elaborate technologies, right? Then we're talking about AR and VR and immersive porn and immersive tech and immersive sexual experiences. There was an artist in Spain who just married a hologram. Of course, it was performative art. She was making a statement. But these are all things that are going to be coming down the pipeline for us very quickly. So you want to have a threesome with your wife? Maybe it's a hologram. That by 2027, I think is going to be a reality, some version of that technology. So what are you going to do with it? Are you going to play? You're going to be adventurous? You're going to be vulnerable? Or is your first thought going to be, I'm going to beat the shit out of this and try and overpower it, right? That's what I mean by spirituality. That's what I mean about self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and regard for yourself and regard for the people around you. If we are moving into a world which, as the futurists say, you're going to be able to make love and have sex with anybody, anywhere, in every way, shape, or form, what are you going to choose and why? That's the question.
Well, let's camp on that last thought for a second because it's an original one in this show. No one has ever been on this show talking about how in the near future we'll be able to have sex with anyone, anywhere, anytime. What's that going to look like? What's the mechanism for bringing that about?
Right. So that's primarily in a virtual world, right? I don't mean I'm going to fantasize about George Clooney and he's going to show up in my living room. I would love that, but not going to happen anytime soon.
No, I
But
can't just go to the grocery store and say, you, over here.
no,
Let's
we're
go into
talking
the
about
back
in
room.
a virtual and a fantasy
Okay.
and in a
All right.
digital
Well, I think that
sense,
clarifies
right?
everything, frankly.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that's what I'm
Okay.
talking about, right?
I
So
thought you were talking about in the real temporal world.
No. Wait, and that in a real world, that's not going to be the reality, I don't think. But if you can imagine it, you can create it in some way, shape, or form. Have you tried the latest VR goggles from Meta? It's pretty crazy.
My son sure has. I know that.
Yeah.
I also know that you can upload a picture of your ex-girlfriend and make her naked using AI.
So that's, I mean,
that's a problem.
When we're talking about women being assaulted, this is the story of we woke up on the 2nd of January to Elon Musk's Bikini-Fi app. Right? Am I pissed off as a woman? Yes. Am I pissed off as a mother of a girl and a boy? Yes. Why? Of all the things you can build, you're putting data centers on Mars, you want to cure cancer from scratch, and this is what you came up with? Pardon my French, the fucking Bikini-Fi app. So we've got to use our powers for good. And if
you're
not,
going to have to
push
take
back.
the good with the bad, Kamna. It's all going to come. It's human nature. I mean, it's just like,
Okay,
guns hunt and guns kill,
Let me. This one is disproportionately what we're calling now image-based sexual violence, which is primarily happening in the digital sphere, is 95% directed towards women. So
yeah,
I don't think
I agree. It's not a good thing.
So we can't turn around and say
upon society.
This is not a good with a bad. Exactly. So if we get together and we push back, so now Elon Musk just big update on this. He hasn't taken it down and he hasn't been punished in any way, shape, or form. He's just put it behind a paywall. So he gets to now make money off of it. No, he wasn't. But in the sexual wellness space, for instance, many founders that are really trying to do meaningful things beyond erectile dysfunction, right? Everybody's very happy to talk about erectile dysfunction and Viagra, lovely.
I know I get 12 or 14 pitches a day.
Correct.
People come on the show.
And but the parallel to that is vaginal lubrication. There are just lots of other things on the female side. A lot of these companies cannot get funded because VCs and a lot of the funding companies have vice clauses. But they cannot use Stripe. They cannot use a lot of these infrastructures. But at the same time, anybody that's paying for a Bikini-Fi app, nobody's getting penalized in that chain. Right? And don't get me wrong. Yes, I'm a feminist. I believe in equality of the sexes. I believe if there was some technology that is coming from men, I believe these technologies are coming from men. I think men are going to be more vulnerable than women because they're going to come for intimacy. I think they're taking young boys, and I don't mean to be sensational about this. I think they're taking young boys offline and radicalizing them. So what we need to do as communities is we need to pull them back out. We need to show them what real love looks like in person. We need to show them what community looks like. They need male mentors, not necessarily fathers, but uncles and teachers and the whole community so that we can counterbalance this. So there are pros and cons on either side, some affecting boys more and some affecting girls more. And this particular one, from an infrastructure standpoint, there are no repercussions across the entire chain, whereas there are in many of these other chains, so to speak.
Well, kind of to land the plane here to close the show, everything progresses. Everything, there's a linear movement throughout civilization. So it isn't like one day we woke up and we were all under assault in this area. I think when smartphones came out and Tinder came out, we started training young women to be just as superficial about looks and money and a very small amount of data as men had always been accused of being. And that ended up transpiring. And in terms of COVID, we were all told to isolate, not be social, and we got used to it. Now what you're seeing is transactional relationships. I mean, why even get married? What's the point? Why have children? They're just a pain in the ass. If I get a real world boyfriend or girlfriend, it's all about, what are they going to do for me? And that has functionally erased the whole idea of intimacy to begin with. It's just been rendered irrelevant. And so we've got to kind of get on our soapbox like you and I are, and admittedly are different ways, and fight for the right to be intimate again.
You don't strike me as a pessimist, Scott, but that was a pretty pessimistic view of relationships. I don't see it that way.
Well, no, hold on.
Hmm.
I'm not advocating the state of affairs right now. I'm actively fighting to go old school. You can't feel, smell, or touch an AI anything. You are missing an entire dimension of human relationship if all you're trying to do is get something out of this person by being with them. Connecting with someone, loving someone, wanting the best for someone, wanting to be in partnership with someone is now seeming quaint to people. I mean, there's a television show out right now that's very popular called Landman.
I love it.
And you love Landman. Okay.
I love Billy Bob Thornton. I just love him.
Well, let's talk about Cooper and Adriana. Okay. He loves her. It's the definition of I have a connection. I love her. And then, she'll playfully say, don't ever do this, or I need that. And she's looking for that connection and that safety and that security. They shouldn't have fallen in love. They weren't in a position to be ready or able for it. And everybody on both sides of the family were like, And that character, Cooper, is being widely just absolutely excoriated by dudes online for being a simp, for being an idiot. Hell yeah, he jumped that guy and beat the crap out of him when he was raping his girlfriend. And there wasn't a jury in Odessa that would have convicted him. We hope, watching the show. But even in the back of our minds in the year 2026, we're like, I don't know. I mean, sorry for the spoiler alerts, by the way. I was
going to say, I haven't seen season 2 yet.
Okay. But I mean, yeah, you're going to be very interested in season 2 because of the relationship that develops between those two. Meanwhile, Billy Bob Thornton and Allie Larder's characters are very transactional, usually until they decide to remember they should be intimate, which has its own charms. But she's all about the money and getting things, and he's all about, I got to work and I just pay your bills, and you look cute and you have nice tits is what he always says to her and everything.
Yeah.
But then every once in a while they'll have a moment where they get together and get all lovey-dovey, and that's what all the women in the audience are waiting to happen, you see? Because deep down, this is still a human need. It's a lie. It's a lie that we don't have to be intimate anymore. And we have to go wake people up, don't we?
So listen, I will absolutely, and I don't disagree with that. I think the big issue here is what I said earlier, is that the tech companies have realized that intimacy is really lucrative, right? So we have to be very careful. Now,
Ersatz intimacy is really lucrative. Simulating it.
Well, of course, but so that's my point, right? I was going to make 2 points to something that you said. One is, yes, intimacy is a fundamental human need, but do not forget that there are big parts of the population that have never had access to real human intimacy. There are people with crippling social anxiety. There are people that have been sequestered away from society because of they're in prison, they're in the military, there are people with physical disabilities, right? So what we're seeing is that these technologies do offer some version of intimacy that they have not had access to. And when we talk about stigma in the digisexuality or the technosexuality space, this is what we mean, right? Because people will be like, oh my God, it's so weird that you have an AI boyfriend, means you can't hack it in the real world. There was no real world to hack for some of these people, right? So let's not take that away from them.
Well, that's an interesting take and a hot one that I'd never heard before. So continue.
And it's going to be more and more and more, right? We're talking about 3D printed genitalia. We're talking about now the joys of sex tech, of the sex tech industry, and the things that are coming for, the things that are very difficult to get funded because everybody's talking about erectile dysfunction, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're talking to a bunch of men in a boardroom, they're like, oh yeah, this I understand. But the other 85 use cases I cannot relate to, and I cannot go home and talk to my family about. So it's very difficult for this industry to get funded. So that's my soapbox that I'll get off. So one is, yes, we're all in agreement that intimacy is a fundamental human need. Technology has the potential to really facilitate it, particularly for those who have what I call better than nothing, right? Particularly for those who haven't had it and haven't had access to it. The second piece is that the functionality is going to get better and better and better and better. So you said old school. Like, you want to go back to old school? I don't want to go back to old school. I want to go back to, oh no, I want to go to a place where everybody has the luxury and the privilege and the joy of just being who they are when it comes to romance, intimacy, and sexuality. I don't want to do missionary with the lights off in monogamy or whatever marriage, because that's not my value system. And somebody else doesn't want to be in a throuple because that's not their value system. You do you, honey, and let the tools help you facilitate that. And coming back to hurt people, I think we'll all be a lot less hurt if we use these tools in a way that actually benefits us, as opposed to a way Musk and Altman and Zuckerberg are encouraging us to use them.
Her name is Kamna Bhojwani. She is a sexologist in San Francisco, California. And you can check her out on Substack, right? As you can check
Brand
me
new.
out as well. Brand new. By going to mountaintoppodcast.com/technosexual. And that is one we haven't had used before. So you can go there. Also, you do have a book with the same title.
I do have a book. I do.
Technosexual coming out. It's not out at the time that we are releasing this particular show, but be on the lookout for that as well on Amazon in the near future. When's it coming out?
Oh, it's not going to be out for a while. So I would say if you want to keep up with this topic, the Substack at Technosexual is the best way to do it. I also write a column called Becoming Technosexual for Psychology Today. And the goal is this, Scott.
Fantastic.
It's not an easy conversation. So
No.
It's the little snippets, 1 week at a time, one article at a time. I'm trying to bring us all along to the best.
And hey, we've had probably a more spirited conversation than these guys are used to. But I mean, nothing's been decided. Nothing's for sure. No. I mean, you said it all. You said a mouthful, Kamna, when you said we don't even understand what consciousness even is. So how the hell are we supposed to wrap our digital heads around this? So I think it's a wonderful conversation. It's an evolving conversation. 10 years ago, we both may come back and look at this episode and laugh our asses off. Who knows?
Sure.
But it sure was fun at the time, and I appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks for being patient with my little home situation.
Oh, yeah. We had a barking dog situation before we hit record, and he's been a good boy, man.
He's been good. Let's quit while we're ahead.
Very, very well. All right. Well, guys, if you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, hey, look, let's talk about all this stuff. Are you finding yourself in the need of a real woman, or are you starting to think maybe you don't need real women anymore and you should become one of those guys? My calendar is free to talk to you guys. Won't cost you a dime. And if it's making sense to put together a coaching program, well, let's do that thing. If not, then, I'm glad to know you. I always like to connect with guys who listen and watch the show because I need new topics. And this certainly was a new one and a good one, and I appreciate that. Also, visit our sponsors when you're there. Hero Soap Company, The Keyport, and Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine. When you visit any of our fine sponsors, please use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an additional 10% off. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.